Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Impactful Conversations podcast with me, Dr. Glenn Wallis, and my very, very good friend and co-host, Nejmi Alexander. Nejmi, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. We're joining us in the middle of a heat wave, so also a little bit warm and prone to complain about it. But aside from that, very well.
Yeah, the whole UK sort of focus is on sort of complaining about the weather, and the fact we're outside our little 3-degree window of comfort means, yeah, we're perfectly legitimate. We can claim it's too cold or too wet one end, too hot the other. So look, we're also joined today by both a good friend of ours and an expert in both transformation and the leaders going through transformation. So I think we were in a really exciting conversation we're about to have with Claire Croft. Claire, thank you so much for joining us on the Impactful Conversations podcast. Great to see you again.
Oh, great to see you both. Thank you so much for having me along.
I'm really looking forward to this. So just give us literally a couple of sentences, if you would, so that the audience can understand a little bit about your background. I've just positioned you as both involved in big transformation and change on the one hand, but I know you do as a leadership coach, the sort of one-to-one side of that. So you're bringing a unique blend here. Can you just give the audience a little insight into that, and then we'll sort of launch into the conversation?
Yeah, of course. So I have been coaching for 13 years and working in transformation specifically for 10 years. I in essence, all I really do, along with my business partner Phil over in Corporate Punk, is we just help people have the conversations they need to have to achieve two outcomes: commercial success and people's success. And what we mean by people's success is that people can actually reconnect to the joy of positive challenge in their work rather than negative challenge. So our work is really grounded in unlocking the barriers that people, because they're so wonderful, put in their own way to achieving the outcomes they're looking to achieve.
Love that. Yeah, love that. Okay, great. So I think we've got a good idea of both your organizational level kind of understanding and then that sort of individual piece. And as you know, as we were talking about just offline, we're both keen to dig into both sides of that. So I'll leave Nejmi to kick us off maybe with one of his, interesting questions to set the tone maybe.
Well, I'm really curious. So in the work that you do with on the transformation side of the work, working with the business, and then on the one-to-one side of the work, working with the leaders of the business as well, how does one sort of inform the other in terms of the roles that you play? Do you find that sometimes there's significant sort of overlap in the roles that you're playing on that side? Maybe sometimes some tension, I don't know.
I mean, look, the job with the work that I do is to always be clear what modality you're in with your client. Right? Am I in coaching mode? Am I in consulting mode? Or am I even sometimes in trainer mode? And ultimately there is a lot of overlap, because at an organizational level and a human level, you are dealing with humans. You are trying to work out, how do we create the ways of working in this organization? How do I personally show up in this organization to achieve the outcomes that we're looking for? And if you end up in a situation where you've got a leader where the work feels very, very different with that leader to the organization, that's its own specific data point, right? That means that leader is either isolated, disconnected, quite honestly, sometimes just in the wrong role. So we're always alert to any sense of disconnect and difference, because that's an issue that needs to be addressed, because leaders lead transformation. That's what they're there to do, so they need to be hardwired into both shaping the organizational aspirations and ambitions and then activating and implementing it with their people.
Yeah. I love that. So, but where do you see that some of that disconnect comes? So when you're in one mode and you see that sort of disconnect between the leader and what's going on, if you were sort of going to reflect on maybe the sort of root cause or two that are most common when you unpick that, what are the most common sort of root causes of that over the time that you've been doing this work?
So if we CEOs are very rarely disconnected, right? That's kind of their job.
Yeah.
But if you sort of knock down from C-suite level into second tier leadership,
Yep.
what can happen is that there is a lack of collaboration happening between C-suite and second tier leadership. And the C-suite has sort of almost isolated itself to come up with transformation strategy, and then it's actually using its second tier leadership as the soldiers to go out into the workforce and execute. Now, the problem with being in a C-suite role, with all the kindness and respect in the world, you cannot be fully connected to the realities of your organization. It just isn't possible, because once you're C-suite, you tend to be up and out. Once you're second tier, you tend to be up into C-suite and then out down into the organization. But all successful transformation cannot start at the end point. You know, we want to be over here, everybody come. Successful transformation requires you to meet people where they are at and take them somewhere different. And so if your second tier leadership is not part of the transformation strategy development, then ultimately you run the risk of you are creating a strategy that you do not know how to implement once the rubber hits the road in your business. And second tier leadership finds that desperately frustrating, that in essence they can feel like order takers from their exec team, and that's a waste of salary as far as I'm concerned. They are bright, intelligent people who are, they're there to bridge the gap between those out there doing the work and those up there leading the business, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. That makes absolute sense, and it's echoed in often what I see in organizations, whether that's transformation or just, you know, broader strategic,
Just life,
you know, like just the day to day, actually that disconnect can often feel really present. And so in your work, how do you help then to create more of that sort of alignment or, you know, connection?
It's a really technical process called conversation, right?
A high degree of skill in order to do it.
And this is why we get paid the small bucks. No, I'm joking. So I think one of the biggest challenges in the world of work is actually people's relationship with time. So there is a massive bias to action in the world of work, like let's just get going. What we help people do is slow down in order to speed up, so that they understand the value actually of thinking for a period of time about what are we trying to do and what might be the likely outcomes if we move forward in this direction. And we tend to bring exec teams and second tier leadership together to have those meaningful conversations. And really it's a process of working with the C-suite to help them see the value, first off, of doing this. And then it's a process of helping second tier leadership feel comfortable enough to maybe speak some truth to power, to share their point of view, to bring their reality into the conversation. So it is nothing more complicated than people in rooms being helped to think and engage differently with one another. And it seems to work quite well.
Strange that, isn't it? Connecting human beings. Yeah.
Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah. One of the things that just struck me as you were explaining that so eloquently, Claire, because I think there were people who go, that's about as crystal clear a version of that as I've heard. It's just like, let's do that. Let's do like what Claire said. Is when you're then coaching the leaders themselves, and I have a particular interest in this because I would recognize some of this in the coaching that I've done over the years, is where do you see leaders could leverage more help from the organization? And the reason I say that is very often I think they're so focused on their day job, they're so focused on what they're meant to be doing for the transformation itself, and very often, in my experience, take a lot of that on themselves. So they'll either dig their heels in and bury that. Can you dig your heels in and bury your head in the sand? I don't know, I'm mixing my metaphors, but
if you do yoga, maybe.
Try and ignore it, or take it all on themselves. And I wonder are there things that you think actually leaders could do a bit more of this to help themselves to also close that gap and make things a bit easier?
Yeah, I mean, look, leaders are wonderful beings, right? They have often have huge drive, huge ambition, broad range of skill and capability. The one thing they're not always as good at as they need to be is understanding what their job is.
Right.
And what I mean by that is they fail to remember that their job is not to have all the answers. Their job is to create the conditions in which all the answers can be found. And they're two different things fundamentally. I do have a great deal of empathy for why they end up in the former, and that's because everyone's got a boss somewhere, right? And unfortunately, the higher up the organization one gets, actually, the more that it feels is at stake, both sort of personally and reputationally, right? So I think it's almost like that terrible tendency to get into keep calm and carry on, and a fear that they will be seen as not good enough if they open up and welcome others in. But I genuinely defy any human being to have all the answers right now. Like, it's physically impossible. As a leader, though, if you can ask the right questions with and of your people, you can engender the kind of quality of conversation that allows you to collectively work out the answer together. And when you can do that, what you also drive is collective ownership. So accountability remains to be quite an issue in a lot of organizations, even right up to the top. But part of the challenge with accountability is lack of engagement and lack of collective ownership. It's not mine, it came to me. So when I'm working with leaders, a lot of the conversation is, what are you here to do and be?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Love that.
It's kind of connecting to, I always take my clients to the end point. When you leave this role, what are you leaving behind? And how do you want that? How does that feel when you hear yourself say that? And it's interesting how often there is no answer to that question beyond, I delivered the commercial objectives. And it's like, well, that's great, but that will waver over time as sitting with you, as you know, adding to your sense of personal value.
Yeah.
You know, it's the old banana armour, ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it that really makes the difference, right?
Yeah, and you're not in total control of that anyway. I mean, as much as delivering the commercial results will be great, and that is the right aspiration for leaders in organisations, you're ultimately not in ultimate control of that. If the market falls through the floor, you could consider actually what would have been an otherwise considered very positive leadership experience and time wrongly to have been unsuccessful. You know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my God, the last 20 years has kind of taught us that. You know,
think.
it has been curveball after curveball after curveball, and we are now in one of the most challenging geopolitical contexts of recent memory, I would say. So the illusion of control is not a great one to have. Like, if you can, the job of leadership right now is to reach acceptance of the uncertainty and focus your energy on, what can I curate, what can I drive, what can I enable within my organization to retain a sense of confidence, to retain some sense of clarity and direction of what we're trying to do.
100%.
I mean, it's absolutely fascinating, and I think so clearly like described what you just mentioned there, Claire. I think it's homework for any dear listener to spend a little bit time in answering those two questions, you know, in your role, what you're here to do and to be, and to spend a bit of time with exploring that. I think in what you described, there were two examples that came to mind for me of working with sort of like leadership communities where the sort of second in line, the senior leaders that are not C-suite -1, are navigating change, and you know, or the monster of AI that's lurking on the horizon, or in the not too distant future, the opportunity to, but actually are in both of those different groups. What came to mind is actually the sort of spirit of disempowerment, I would say, like this idea that actually, you know, waiting to be informed of like, well, this is what we need to do in order to lead over this period of time, or not feeling necessarily invited to challenge upwards or to ask the questions that they need to ask in order to get whatever degree of clarity is reasonable to expect, or to co-create, to try and create some sense of clarity. And so those conversations were just not happening independently in both of those communities. And actually that came to the fore when we explored some of the challenges around how to navigate change and build the skills to lead downwards, but also across and upwards. There's a real opportunity there for leaders to take to lead, to even when there's a lack of visibility or clarity around the future, or what the direction of travel will be in the medium or longer term. And what really stood out to me from both of those, so being in those rooms with both of those audiences, is that when there's a lack of clarity, your role as a leader is to try and create some clarity, at least for yourself or for your people, and to really take ownership, collective ownership, to create that. But it feels like there was a disconnect between waiting to be invited and actually maybe from the more senior folks just expecting leaders to step forward into that fold.
Well, that's the challenge of humans in the world of work, right? And I want to be really clear, anything I say does not come from any place of judgment. It comes from deep empathy, because nobody goes to work to do a bad job. Everybody gets out of bed in the morning to try and make a meaningful contribution. But what you just described is a phenomenon that is just pervasive in the world of work, which is othering. They're not coming to me and stepping up. They're not coming to us. Like, the amount of othering is significant in our kind of workplace cultures at the moment, but it comes from almost like learned helplessness at times. Right? Because and you have to have empathy for a C-suite, right? Because the C-suite has got the board, the C-suite has got shareholders, like they are under immense pressure too. So I don't want to come across as like the C-suite's the problem. It's really not. It's just the human condition of navigating complex dynamics that evolve over years and years. And we'll sometimes be talking to clients, and what becomes clear is what's driving the culture at this time has got nothing to do with the C-suite that's in place. It's the C-suite that came before,
right?
That absolutely pointed the finger of blame if somebody got something wrong, that was overly aggressive, that was that did engage in transformation, that was basically hatchet job. Just get rid of the chess pieces on the chessboard, not we're dealing with human beings. So there's so many different layers going on psychologically in the world of work, but othering is the one that lets us off the hook of having to look at ourselves and go, how am I contributing to the current reality I'm faced with? Because we do as humans like the path of least resistance. And in this context, I can just blame them. It's just easier, right?
Yeah, and it's not as if those leaders also haven't got all the other stuff that they're meant to be doing too. So frankly, you might well want a bit of breathing space. So a bit of othering, by the way, never heard that word before. I will be dropping it into conversation and referencing you now as a source of othering, which is a lovely idea. And I absolutely understand the concept and have seen it many, many times working with leaders. But I just think that there's those people particularly squeezed in the middle. I accept absolutely what you're saying, by the way, about the C-suite. My wife sat in the C-suite for 12 years and I absolutely recognize it too. But particularly that group -1, -2, where they're sort of trying to keep the lights on and deliver the transformation, they're executing the transformation plan. I can absolutely empathize with them thinking, do you know what? They haven't come to me. They haven't shared with me. So I just crack on with my day job and let some of that slide. I think it's a really fair representation the way you've put it. What's your let's raise the elephant in the room kind of question. Links to that, I think, because it's another pressure. into this transformation space, organizationally and at an individual level, which is AI. Opportunities here for leaders. Let's explore that first. What do you see as the opportunities for leaders going through a transformation to leverage AI to help? What are you seeing in some of that space, maybe?
Well, I'm not seeing it,
Right,
but I would like to
okay.
see it. I mean, I read a report last week, and it was borderline depressing that as it stands today, of all the potential outcomes of AI adoption, the only outcome that every C-suite role agrees on is cost cutting.
Right.
Right? That's depressing, because actually what AI could be in your organization is a means to unlock innovation and growth in your business. And I think any organization that lands their AI adoption strategy in innovation growth is going to win. I think those who land it in cost cutting are in a race to the bottom. And actually, I heard a case study on Friday about, are you familiar with Klarna, the payment? Yeah. I mean, aside from any of the morals around how they do things, but they got rid of 50% of their workforce when they started adopting AI. 2 years down the line, they're recruiting everyone back.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Cost cutting is not the right frame for AI by any stretch of the imagination. And the problem with the dialogue and discourse around it at the moment is it's very grounded in efficiency. And efficiency is code word for cost cutting in the world of work these days, right? It's just, that's the lipstick that's been put on that pig. And the problem is that you, with that frame, you suppress the potential for real performance in your people, because all they go is the narrative around job losses is correct. It's not. AI cannot physically take someone's job. A human being who is adept at utilizing the potential of AI can absolutely take your job. But that's a human, that's not the technology. And I feel like we're affording the technology too much credibility as it stands right now. It could be amazing for businesses, I think, to achieve more. There will be job losses, don't get me wrong, but to achieve more impact and value creation in what they're trying to be and do in this world.
Interesting. Really, yeah. I agree with you. I think there's that. It feels to me, I think I might have said this before on the podcast, but it feels to me similar to in the late 90s, early 2000s, when, you know, organizations were taking the middle manager layer out of an organization. So they would cost cut by just slicing the entire middle middle manager layer out. And then 3 years later found that actually there was such a span between top and bottom that you actually have to put them back in again. And it's coming about it from the wrong, as you said, it's coming about it from the wrong angle. If you're leading with cost, then you're going to do several things, many of which you've just talked about. But I think the other thing is in that process, you'll lose really good people. Yeah. So, you know, the talent that you work so hard to attract and grow and develop, you know, could potentially be exited in that process. Yeah. And then all of that investment and value that they were bringing, you're now is lost to the organization as well. And you sort of think there's a lot of danger. I think there's a lot of dangers in it. Nejmi, go on.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Like, if it was to make a hypothesis, right, I think what's clear from AI is that it seems that the sort of clearest frame of reference that Claire, that you just described there, you know, cost cutting efficiency, is sort of fear led. It's driven from like the minimum of what can we do to utilize this technology, and that's, you know, going to contribute towards, or could contribute towards, job losses, etc. And so the role of leaders in navigating the transformation is going to be informed by some of this sort of uncertainty and probably this sort of fear that you know pervades all of it. And so I think there's a really important role for leaders to try to lead with, you know, positivity, with innovation in mind, with like the possibility of opportunity, and not just the threat of,
Yeah.
whatever we might see. But that's difficult, right? Like as a leader, you're navigating both trying to be a positive symbol for change amongst your people, whilst maybe not feeling like
Bring it yourself. Yeah.
Well, it's cognitive dissonance, right? You're asking me to engage with the very thing I think could destroy me.
Yeah.
So that's a driver of psychological stress for some people. Other people obviously feel differently. But I think the real tension in all of this is, and this has emerged over the last 10 years. It's always been there, but I think it's really palpable now. The inability to work to long term versus short term. And delivering short-term commercial outcomes versus long-term commercial success. AI requires a long-term view.
Yeah.
I fear what will happen is people will make these short-term commercial decisions. And, we talk to leaders at the minute about the need for a stewardship mindset. So that idea of what are you here to protect and nurture in your work and in your people? Because the other thing that I think needs to be very prevalent in people's minds is the state in which we're all going into AI adoption. And what I mean by that is overwhelm is possibly the word I hear most regularly from people. Like there is a real sense of overwhelm in the world of work, and you're bringing in something that can think for people. So we start to unintentionally, subconsciously, we outsource decision making, we outsource judgment, we outsource collaboration to the technology that isn't robust enough to be warranted that permission. So I just think that sense of who are we and what skills and capabilities do we value in this organization as we allow AI to work with us is really, really critical for leaders to be clear on.
Yeah, 100%.
I love that. And I just want to pause on what you just described there, because I think it was really powerful there, Claire, again, a little bit of homework, dear listener. In your leadership responsibility, what are you here to protect and what are you here to nurture? Like actually, what do you want to, create, nurture, evolve within your teams, within your leadership, to be really intentional around that, and to slow down and do some of the thinking to, define that. Because actually, if with your, at the pace that that you're expected to execute with, probably don't have a hell of a lot of time to be doing that. So this is a good opportunity to feel the prompts, to actually explore that, because I think it's just really important.
I'm struck by that actually being even more important now than it might otherwise. I think it's always been important, that sort of identity work, both for the organisation to be clear on what they want as the identity of leadership and leaders in the organisation, and an individual level. Some of the questions you've already asked, Claire, listeners to think about in relation to their own leadership. What do you want to be as a leader here? What do you want to be remembered for? What is it, what it can be like to be led by you? I think it's even more important because, to your point, you could give up some of that identity, or it might be taken away from you, and given to a large language model, by the way, of which I'm a fan. So I'm not beaten up on large language, but I think it's, to your point, I see it as the opposite end to the way that organizations are currently using it, because you can only cutting is ultimately finite. You reach, even if you lost everybody in the organization, ultimately you can't cut costs any more than that. But the growth at the top end is at least theoretically limitless. So if you're applying it that way, the options for, or the opportunity for AI is, to your point, is absolutely massive. It's finite the other way. And I just think there's,
I also feel like, and this is where perhaps my own fears kind of do kick in, having raised a child through the social media era before we knew what it was really doing, what its intentions were, right? I really feel like there are lessons to be learned from technology adoption of time gone by, because ultimately people who create technology do it with an agenda of some sort. So I think let's try and learn lessons from the past, and let's be cautiously optimistic. I think for me, I really value what AI might become for us. I think it could be transformative. You know, part of me goes, because we could save so much time. And then I go, well, everybody thought that when bloody email came along, and look how that panned out, right? It's like, will we kid ourselves that there's this utopian state that could be created by AI? So I also just hope we all take a moment to think, what signals are there from the past that we might want to just take a moment to consider before we plow ahead. I mean, as it is, 95% of AI pilots deliver no value, right? We've got time to work this out, but we can work it out mindfully and impactfully.
Yeah. No, I there was something what you said a moment ago, Claire, around like what you're deferring to the tech. You know, like I do think for everyone, like you just described, like there's a real opportunity for us to set our own ground rules around how we want to engage with in order to maximize the opportunity of technology. For example, if you want to create, you spend the time being creative and use it around the edges to like augment some of that thinking, but don't defer the thinking firsthand to the technology, because in doing so you're weakening the muscles of being creative, which I think everybody has the best of. But that's one as an example. But again, decision making, really being able to define what a good outcome looks like, and then utilizing the technology rather than asking the technology to just determine what good outcome looks like, and just accepting whatever comes off the back of it. I think there are ways in which we can utilize in order to, again, maximize the opportunity without giving up some of the like mental muscles that are critical for our own success in careers, in leadership, but just generally in life as well, I think.
Well, I mean, there's already studies being done on atrophy of the brain, right, around all of this stuff. I mean, but I sort of, I'm not gonna buy fully into that. I just think humans are programmed to create. I just, that's how we've managed to evolve, and I really hope we protect that. But in the world of work, it needs to be an expectation that is protected, because otherwise, with the weight of pressures and challenges that all organizations are dealing with, humans cannot be expected not to use a resource that might help them. That's kind of unfair. So so much of this is just about being conscientious, isn't it? It's just about being alert to both the opportunities and the watch outs, and move forward with purpose in your adoption of AI.
I don't want to take us down another rabbit hole, and maybe this will be a conversation for another time that we could come back to, but something just genuinely just struck me, which is, if you think about the 5 years since the pandemic and the increased, or so should I say, actually probably the decreased collaboration that's happened, because much work is on a platform, so is on Teams or Zoom or whatever you use. So actually there's probably less collaboration, certainly less informal collaboration than there would have been when we were all in an office. And now we've got AI, which actually means I don't need to talk to Claire, because actually I can talk to Claude. And so, there's another layer there of potentially distancing the gap between human beings, which means there's less collaboration, less innovation maybe, and less connection, so that you don't get that sort of 1 + 1 = 3 quite so much, because the one on the other side of my one is Claude, not Claire. And I wonder whether there's something for organizations to look out for here. I'm quite intrigued by that idea. What are the dangers that organizations are seeing about a reduced amount of collaboration just because of the way things have panned out in the last 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, we are seeing more return to office mandates. I mean, FS has just gone absolutely all out. It's either 4 or 5 days back in the office. But generally, the thing that I think is quite interesting is about the well-being of people in this, actually, because we all need to belong. We all need to be connected to get to be like baseline sense of well-being requires social connection. And really interestingly, when it comes to confidence, social connection and having conversation that maybe is well received, like we're doing right now, that is a key enabler to elevating confidence. So if I'm never in conversation, or if I'm not in enough conversations with people, actually has a very significant impact on how I see my own value in what I'm doing. So I think it's a really important point you raised there around, you've got to bring people back to work in the right way for the business and the people within it. And I am not a fan of back 5 days a week or else. Ultimately, dear leaders, you said they could do what they like, right? You made this bed. Don't now penalize them for the fact that you want to change the duvet. It's, you know, do it in a way that encourages and inspires people to want to be together in work and collaborating together, rather than a edict.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I think it's, and I think that works at all levels, doesn't it? That works at C-suite, making those kind of decisions, but also if I'm a leader, you know, further down the organization, you know, and I've got a team of 4, I can think I can affect that to some extent very locally. And I think, you know, we're all fans here of trying to help individual leaders on the ground, you know, make their life a little bit easier and certainly to be more effective in it, you know. It's, I think that's what we're all here for. Look, as always, as fully expected, but always when you and I have a chat, and it's been a lovely sort of 3-way conversation. Thank you so much. Got so much out of that. It's been a really lovely conversation. It's been great to reconnect with you, and thank you ever so much for your time. It's been brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much. No, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation with you both.
Fantastic. Until next time, everybody. Nejmi, have a good week or two, sir, and I'll catch up with you again soon.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.